Welcome back to Crypto Bit Law, where we bring you all things cryptocurrency, legal and regulatory. Today we'll be taking an in-depth look at the securities laws as applied in the new and evolving realm of Metaverse real estate. We'll be looking at a case study from a company called Republic, who recently announced a $60 million investment round, creating a new company called EveryRealm, who will be soliciting public investor funds to invest in and develop Metaverse real estate. Now, if you like this content, please like it, subscribe to our channel, comment below and let us know what you think, and without further ado, we'll jump right in. So we lead off with the big news that EveryRealm has been formed by a $60 million funding round led by the ubiquitous Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen partnered up with Republic, a company who has been around for a few years, and they specialize in crowdfunding or raising money from small investors, members of the public who traditionally have been pushed out from being investors in companies like this one. And they announced, this would have been on the 10th, that they have led a very large funding round from big players such as Coinbase and celebrities such as Paris Hilton. This is a pretty big deal because of the profile of the investors and the amount of the investment round. And not only that, this is probably the biggest funding round ever led by a female CEO. So all of these aspects make it a very interesting topic for exploration. The concept of the metaverse is constantly changing, but essentially what it is a play on NFTs. NFTs have, to this point, been mostly these trades in these images or JPEGs that have these NFT serial numbers attached to them, but there's more you can do with NFTs than just JPEGs. You can also attach them to all sorts of other digital type assets. In this particular case, we're looking at digital representations of land or real estate, and these are going to come up in places like Decentraland and the Sandbox, where there are designated spaces with coordinates that can have NFTs attached to them. People can invest in these NFTs as if they're buying a plot of land in these metaverse spaces, and they can build buildings on them. So if you build a building on a piece of metaverse real estate, what you're doing is you're adding potential value to the land, and if you attract other investors in pieces of land around it, you can end up creating what's almost like a digital city where real estate or digital real estate prices are expected to increase. People have started investing pretty seriously in these metaverse spaces like Decentraland especially, and the Sandbox. Axie Infinity as well has begun to see some success. And what Republic, now known as EveryRealm, seeks to do is they want to be one of the big players in the digital real estate holding and development space. So what the point of this particular funding round was they wanted to create an asset manager who is going to invest in not only the real estate, but build the buildings, maybe different NFTs like apparel or art that are going to inhabit some of the buildings in the digital real estate buildings. And what they want to do then is watch the price appreciation and perhaps sell at some point to realize their investment, or continue to develop and raise more money to build in more areas. Now, the big point here with someone like an EveryRealm is they're going to be the ones who provide that critical mass of investments that attract other players into the real estate space. Because once you have a certain amount of value being created in these virtual land areas, that's going to attract other investment. It's going to push up the value of the investments overall. And I guess the long-term play would be that we are all participating in some form in the metaverse, whether it's by going to work at a virtual office space or going to shop for clothes in a virtual shopping center. So it's very exciting to see what is happening in the metaverse, and EveryRealm is leading the way. But today, what we want to talk about is how EveryRealm has raised money from the public to try to get this critical mass going. And over the last year, it has been quite an evolution, and they have taken advantage of some pretty specific securities law exemptions that we want to explore today. The founder of Republic is a guy named Kendrick Nguyen, Now, Mr. Nguyen is a former securities litigator who, in contradistinction to many of the players in the cryptocurrency space, touts himself as someone who can provide compliant tokenization, or the ability to comply with these securities laws instead of trying to get around them. So what we're going to see today is we're not going to see some attempt to window dress and call things something that they're not. What we're going to see is someone who is trying to actively use the securities laws to accomplish the goals they want to accomplish and be the legitimate player in what could be a very, very valuable space in the metaverse. The main piece of legislation that's going to apply here is the Securities Act of 1933. Now, you'll recall that during the Great Depression, there were several bills passed to try and increase the trust in the securities and exchange system. There was the Securities Act of 33, the Securities Exchange Act of 34, and the Investment Company Act of 40. We've mentioned all of these in previous videos. Today, we're going to be looking at a very specific aspect of the Securities Act of 33. Now, the Securities Act was the act that dealt with the truth in securities offerings. What they wanted to do was create standards for disclosure by companies who are offering securities so that investors would have the information necessary to decide whether it was a good investment or not. Now, the law was not intended to prevent investors from losing money. Of course, you could still lose money, but the point was, if there was a problem in the disclosures or there was a misrepresentation, this law was designed to allow those investors who had been misled to have some sort of recourse against the issuer and to weed out the companies that maybe before this law was passed, maybe in the 20s and early 30s, were selling things to the public that were not actually ever contemplated to exist. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to explore how the Securities Act of 33 is going to apply to an early stage investor in the metaverse. So we have the incongruent situation where we are trying to apply an act from almost 90 years ago to a very new space. But as I mentioned, the Republic CEO is intent upon complying with and using these securities laws to his advantage. And so what we want to look at are how he specifically is going to do that. Now, you can probably guess that there are some exceptions to the onerous requirements of the Securities Act of 33. An early stage company typically does not have the resources or the ability to fully comply with all the disclosure requirements, all the lawyers that would have to be hired, the investment firms that would have to be hired to try to comply with all of these rules. So there are some exceptions, and those exceptions come under a rule called Rule 4A2. Now, there are several regulations underneath that are contemplated and give more guidance to companies who are seeking to come under these safe harbors. We're not going to go over all of them, and we're not going to go over the history of all of them because it's just too much information. So that's why we chose a case study that really only use 3 of them. And they are all discussed here on the SEC's website. The 3 that we're going to be talking about today, and this is a pretty useful table for looking at them, are 2 under Regulation D, Rule 506B, and Rule 506C, and 1 under Regulation A, the Tier 2 Regulation A exemption. The Regulation D, generally speaking, are for private placement of shares that are not generally offered to the public. So the idea behind this exemption was, since we're not advertising to the public, as long as we have accredited investors, that is, investors who have sufficient capital and know-how so that they won't be easily misled, and as long as we are giving them enough information to make sound decisions about that private placement, then the general rule of Securities Act of 33 will not apply. So what you'll see here is in these disclosures that they are offering a private placement under Section 4A2, which is the general section on private placement, and Rule 506B or 506C. The difference between 506B and 506C is 506B is going to be to someone like an insider or someone who is intimately known by the company, so that there really is no verification required of the accreditation of that investor, and there's a sufficient level of trust there to where there's not additional steps needed to verify that this is a compliant Regulation D offering. Now, 506C is the opposite. It's where the issuer is soliciting from investors who, while accredited, aren't necessarily intimately connected. It's a little bit broader. They're just looking to the general market, and in this case, it's going to be the venture capital market, to see if there are any accredited investors who want to take a shot at their early stage company. So while there are some limited financial disclosures required, they're not nearly the ones that are required under a general securities offering under the Securities Act of 33. The other type of exemption, Regulation A, is much newer. Regulation A comes from the Jobs Act of 2012. What the Jobs Act was trying to do was it was trying to open up the investing realm to members of the public who weren't necessarily accredited. Now, this sounds all well and good. It incorporates the concepts of crowdfunding with other concepts of people who aren't full-time investors but do have some capital that they'd like to put to work, and they don't want to have to necessarily go through a mutual fund or other type of investment advisor. It was supposed to be a democratization of investing. Of course, the problem with that is you're going to have some unscrupulous issuers looking to members of the public who don't necessarily understand everything about securities laws and could possibly be taken advantage of. So what Regulation A tries to do is it tries to find a balance between allowing people in who are not accredited to invest a certain amount of money into a early stage company, but to give them enough information to make a good decision and to require those non-accredited investors to report enough financial information to ensure that they had the ability and the net worth to invest without dire consequences in the event of loss. So that's the three general exceptions to the Securities Act of 33 we're discussing today. Two under Regulation D, one of which involves no solicitation, the other of which involves a limited solicitation to accredited investors, and then one under Regulation A, the Tier 2 of Regulation A, which requires a $75 million offering and a full vetting of the unaccredited investors. Now, we at Crypto Bit Law first became aware of the Republic Realm Real Estate Investment Trust play, not through the recent Series A offering that created the EveryRealm Corporation, but this is a research report that came into our possession a few months ago called Day One Investor. Now, this is an independent report issued by a company called Brownstone, who is going to tell us why, as members of the public, unaccredited investors that is, we would be interested in investing in something called the Metaverse. Now, this is going to present to us all of the pitfalls of allowing unaccredited investors to foray into what's not only a complicated digital and technical space that they may not understand, but also a rather complicated series of investment vehicles that really should sometimes be left to the accredited investors. Now, we're all for democratization of investment, but what we want to point out here is, while there are many projects in the cryptocurrency realm that are trying to get around the securities laws, and in fact almost have to be able to survive early on, this is an attempt by a company to do this legitimately. And we want to show you that even legitimately done, there are some pitfalls to allowing unaccredited investors to foray into these complex investments. Now, what this particular document is going to do is going to create the concept of the real estate investment trust as applied to the metaverse. Because in reality, what Realm Metaverse Real Estate is a company that invests in NFTs. It's not a real estate investment trust, but it's kind of like one. And that's what people who aren't familiar as much with cryptocurrency would be able to understand. And that's the point of this document, is to try to ground people who don't really understand cryptocurrency in the opportunity that they have by analogy. The analogy that he paints here is of what it would have been like to invest in a piece of real estate where a city like Miami would eventually grow. You would have seen the price of that real estate go up very, very high, and what he's suggesting is you have the same opportunity in the metaverse, but you don't have to buy the land yourself. You can invest in a company called Republic Realm that is going to do the work for you. And we're going to come back to this document later to go over the specific claims it makes. But for now, we just want to point out that where you're brought when you look at this document is you're brought to a site called republic.com, which is the parent of all of these different companies we'll be talking about in a moment. Republic.com is a DBA of a company called Open Deal Inc. Open Deal Inc. controls a crowdfunding portal. They also control a broker-dealer, and they control a company that operates the website and posts the offerings. That company is called Republic Core. You'll see right here, Republic Core is considering hosting this Reg A plus securities offering by Realm Metaverse Real Estate. And so what you could have done if you had gotten in time is you could have reserved your space for a placement of at least $1,000 minimum investment in Realm Metaverse Real Estate. Of course, that funding round is now closed, but all of the reservations are closed. You can join the waitlist because they have not yet announced that there will be a Regulation A offering. They are still waiting for the approval from the SEC. So while they do that, we're going to be looking at how this company has evolved since its inception in March of 2021. We're going to start by looking just at the control structure of Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. today, how it is operated, managed, the different classes of shares, all of the things that we're going to need to understand before we look at its evolution. And when we look at the evolution and how it got to where it is today being the announcement of EveryRealm Inc., we will understand how the securities laws can be used to protect the company that is raising the money, to allow them to raise money with minimal cost and risk, and be able to employ advertising techniques that would normally be reserved for those companies who are doing the full offering under the Securities Act of 33. So first we will go to the control structure of Realm Metaverse Real Estate today. So what you see before you is a diagram of the control structure of Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. We'll be calling Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. the REIT, like the Brownstone research paper calls it, or the Real Estate Investment Trust, because it's going to share names with a lot of different entities, and it becomes confusing very quickly. So we'll try and use nicknames that keep all the different aspects of this structure in your mind clearly, or as clearly as possible. So we'll start at the bottom of this diagram with the REIT. The REIT offers two classes of shares. These two classes of shares are identical in every respect except for one. Class A shares have 20 votes per share, and Class B shares have 1 vote per share. So the purpose of splitting the shares into two classes was to provide one class of shares 20 times more voting power than the other type. All of the Class A shares are held by an entity called Republic Realm Manager, LLC. We'll be calling this company the manager. So the manager owns all of the voting shares, or the more concentrated voting shares, of the REIT. The rest of the shares, the Class B shares, are what are offered to the private placement accredited investors and the potential unaccredited investors who will be investing through the offering described in that Brownstone research paper and is offered on the Republic.com website by reservation only at this point. The purpose being they can raise a lot of money through Class B shares, and they'll continue to do that, but they can maintain control through the manager who holds all of the Class A shares. The Class A shares provide for ownership and control for decisions made that require a vote, but the day-to-day operation is governed by a contract called the management contract, executed between the manager and the REIT. The manager is owned by EveryRealm Inc., the company that announced its Series A funding round. Prior to that funding round, it was known as Republic Realm Inc. Republic Realm Inc. is owned by two individuals, an individual named Stein and one named Yorio. Stein and Yorio are agents of the manager and of EveryRealm. Stein, Yorio, and an individual named Durgi are the directors on the board of directors and the executive officers of the REIT. These three individuals are known as the principals. It is Yorio who is the CEO of the REIT and of the manager, incidentally. And so when they talk about one of the largest offerings ever conducted by a female CEO, they're referring to Miss Yorio. So what you have here is you have different legal entities that are governed by different classes and types of shares and a management contract, but the individuals involved in all of them up to a few days ago were the same. EveryRealm, when it was created a few days ago, when it offered to members of the public in private placement, it went from being entirely operated as an affiliate of Republic. Remember, that's the DBA for Open Deal Inc., the Republic ecosystem, controlled by Mr. Nguyen, to a company that is a standalone, controlled by a series of shareholders, including those Series A investors, and Republic as a minority owner. So what we have is a REIT that is offering shares to the public to invest in Metaverse real estate. It is operated and controlled by a manager whose managing member is the subject of the new Series A offering that was announced to the public, now called EveryRealm Inc. So the regular unaccredited investor is being offered a Class B share in the REIT. As soon as the SEC approves that circular, they're supposedly going to announce that, and if you reserve your spot, you'll be able to claim your shares in the REIT. But those investors were not offered a share in Republic Realm Inc. to become the spinoff EveryRealm Inc. That was offered to accredited investors and certain celebrity investors in a funding round, a Series A funding round led by Andreessen Horowitz. So Republic remains a minority investor, but it is a standalone company that is going to be the managing member of a managing company who manages the REIT through a management contract and certain voting shares. I hope that is as clear as it can be, but there are certain reasons why they want to do it this way. The manager operates under this agreement because they want to have a contractual relation only. They do not want to have fiduciary responsibilities to the REIT. So the relationship is governed by contract, and the manager is compensated under the agreement with a base management fee of a certain percent and an incentive fee, which is based on the net asset value of the digital assets held by the REIT. Now, of course, who's going to determine the net asset value? Well, that's one of the tasks that is assigned to the manager under the management contract. So the manager gets to determine the net asset value, which will in turn support its incentive fee. Now, the manager is, as you'll recall, operated by the same individuals as the REIT. But let's say you're an investor in the REIT and you don't like how the REIT is being operated. What is your recourse? Well, your recourse is you would have to try to attack the manager or sue the manager, and you can't sue the manager under any theory of fiduciary breach, like a duty of loyalty. So the manager is free to engage in any pursuit that may or may not conflict with the interest of the REIT. They may determine the net asset value in such a way that benefits them in terms of the incentive fee or some other way, and the private investor in the REIT will have no recourse under a theory of a breach of duty of loyalty, a fiduciary duty. Instead, their only theory will be a breach of contract. Of course, in order to be able to even accomplish that, they would probably have to have a majority vote by the REIT, which of course would necessitate that at least one of the Class A shares would have to vote to do that, which they are not going to do because they are also the controller of the manager, and any conflict that is represented by that relationship has been waived under the terms of the management contract. So what this system allows is it allows the REIT to exist as just a holding company for digital assets. It has no employees. It only has a board of directors and a management contract. The management contract is supervised by the board and executed by the operators of the manager, who are the same individuals. The manager is thus insulated from fiduciary liability by controlling the Class A shares, controlling the votes that would be required to engage in any sort of retaliatory or compensatory action by the investors in the REIT. And they're also insulated by the management contract itself that creates a contractual relationship and limits all of the possible theories of liability that an investor in the REIT could come up with. So those are the reasons why this type of structure might be beneficial to an issuer of a security in a REIT. The investors think, oh, I'm getting a share in this company, I'm going to have some control over it. No, you're going to have no control over its operation. You're going to have no control over any of its decision making, even if those decisions are put to a vote, because the votes are ultimately controlled by the operator. Now we'll go to the origins of the REIT, how it began a year ago, March 2021. We're going to start here with the founding document, what's known as a Certificate of Incorporation. Anytime a company is created, This is the document that is going to inaugurate its creation, the filing and approval of a certificate of incorporation by the Secretary of the state in which the corporation is formed. In this case, the REIT was incorporated in the state of Delaware, and its original name was Republic Realm Inc. Now, you'll recall that the current name is Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc., but that was not the case when it began. The REIT was known as Republic Realm Inc. Just a quick overview of a certificate of incorporation. It has certain basic requirements that are necessary to validly form the company under the general corporation law of the state of Delaware. It has to name the corporation, that's Republic Realm Inc. It has to provide a registered office where a registered agent is located, and it has to describe the nature or business purpose of the corporation. Typically, that's to engage in any lawful act or activity, which is a valid statement of the purpose of the business. It also goes and describes the two classes of stock that we originally discussed in our control structure portion of the video, Class A and Class B stock. It also talks about how the bylaws are to be inaugurated and amended. Bylaws are like the statutes of a corporation, whereas the certificate of incorporation is like the Constitution. So the certificate creates it, and in order to amend the certificate, you have to file a new amended certificate, whereas with the bylaws, it's merely by vote of the stockholders. So as you probably guess, the Class A stockholders will have a greater say in how the bylaws are inaugurated and changed. But you'll note here that there was one amended and restated certificate of incorporation, which came 10 days later. This is the amended and restated certificate of incorporation of Republic Realm Inc. The purpose of this amendment and restatement was to further delineate how many shares were authorized under the Class A and Class B designations. So just not a big change, but I wanted to point out how these corporations are formed, and I wanted to show you the origin of the REIT and how far it's going to evolve from this inaugural document. Now, what this slide is attempting to do is lay out as clearly as possible in timeline form how the REIT evolved from its incorporation in March of 2021 up to the report the other day of the creation of EveryRealm Inc., the managing member of its manager. Now, the manager, what we're calling the REIT manager, pre-existed the REIT, believe it or not. The first act relevant to us today is the March 4th, 2021 report by Republic Realm Manager LLC, who we're calling the REIT manager. They reported a Regulation D offering of up to $1 million to the public, and it doesn't indicate in there exactly what the investment was for, but it does indicate that the REIT manager is controlled by a managing member, Compound Asset Management LLC. Compound is owned and operated by Yorio and Stein. So keep in mind that at the beginning, before the REIT is incorporated, the manager exists as Republic Realm Manager, and its managing member is Compound Asset Management LLC, where Yorio and Stein were originally employed. Now, a little background on Yorio and Stein. They come from the real estate, the physical real estate world. They join Republic in their capacities as the officers of Compound Asset Management, and they are the managing member through Compound of the REIT manager, who has engaged a Regulation D private placement offering of $1 million. 5 days later, we see the Republic Realm Inc. Certificate of Incorporation filed with the amendment and restatement 10 days later on the 19th. So at this point, up until August 25th, we have a REIT, whose name at that time was Republic Realm Inc., and a REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC, whose managing member is Compound Asset Management. Compound and the REIT are owned and operated by the same individuals, the principals, Yorio and Stein, and Durgi is an additional principal of the REIT. The initial notice by the manager on March 4th of 2021 of a Regulation D offering gives us a good opportunity to do a quick overview of the form of the notice. So if you want to do a Regulation D offering, you file this Form D with the SEC. So it gives us a lot of important information. First, the Republic Realm Manager LLC, we see here, so we know this company pre-existed the REIT. The REIT manager pre-existed the REIT, and we see that the issuer is indeed the manager, the managing REIT. It also gives us Jesse Stein, the COO, the managing member, Janine Yorio, the CEO of the managing member, and this Compound Asset Management LLC, the managing member. So this is how we know that Compound Asset Management LLC is the managing member of the REIT manager just before and at the inauguration of the REIT. So you'll see here under 6, this is an important piece of information we'll be looking at. The exemption claimed is under Rule 506B. 506B is for situations where they are not doing a general solicitation to the public. So there are limited investigation requirements imposed upon the issuer to determine the accreditation of the investors. We see that if we keep going down, there's a minimum investment of $25,000, that they are offering $1 million in this Regulation D offering. $300,000 has already been sold to, if you look in this box down here, 6 accredited investors. We don't know who those accredited investors are. We don't know if the additional amount of $700,000 was sold afterwards, but we do know that this was offered to accredited investors who we accept are accredited without further investigation, and it is signed by the principal for the issuer Republic Realm Manager LLC, and Jesse Stein, who signs as the manager of the managing member on March 4th, 2021. So as we go through this timeline, if you're wondering where I'm getting this information, it is from this form. Each time there is a form like this, it gives us a spot on the timeline that we're able to use as a waypoint to determine what exactly is happening as time goes on. The next significant date on our timeline is August 25th, 2021. On August 25th, there are going to be 2 Form Ds filed, one reporting a Regulation D 506B offering, and another reporting a Regulation D 506C offering. So the B offering is the one that does not require further investigation of the accreditation, and 506C is one that, because it's looking as a general solicitation of accredited investors of the public, that will require an additional investigatory process. So what is important here is the 506B offering. What the 506B offering does is it reports to the SEC that the REIT, Republic Realm Inc., whose Class A shares were created in that certificate of incorporation as amended, is going to transfer the entirety of those Class A shares to the REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC. So August 25th was the date in which the voting shares of the REIT were transferred in their entirety to the REIT manager. The second offering, reported the same day, reported a $9,178,000 sale of Class B shares to 51 accredited investors. That sale wasn't entire. It was not just reported that they were offering it to the public, but that it had already been offered and all the shares had been purchased by all those accredited investors in that round. So as of August 25th, there are all the outstanding Class A shares are held by the REIT manager, and $9 million worth of Class B shares had been sold to 51 accredited investors. And now we'll go over the Form D for each of these reported issuances. See the name of the issuer, Republic Realm Inc. That is the name of the REIT at this time. The related persons, we'll see Jesse Stein and Janine Yorio, who report themselves to be co-presidents, co-secretaries, and co-treasurers of the REIT. And we see Andrew Durgee here, who reports in as a director only. He is that third member who make up that triumvirate of principals of the REIT. Scroll down here, we'll see that it is a 506B offering, offered in, it says the date of first sale was in March of 2021. So while it's being reported in August, this actually occurred 5 days after the amended and restated certificate was filed. So this was almost immediate. Immediately after the creation of the REIT certificate creates those Class A and Class B shares, amends the amount authorized to be issued by the corporation, and then takes all those Class A shares and transfers them to the REIT manager. The total amount sold is valued at $725,000. That is a valuation that they placed upon it based on a price per share, but the gist of it is the company's Class A common stock was all sold to the REIT manager under 506B of Regulation D. You'll see here there's one accredited investor. you'll see down here as well something else interesting under use of proceeds. The proceeds have a clarification that Jesse Stein and Janine Yorio are agents of the manager of the company, Republic Realm Manager LLC, which receives a base property management fee and an incentive management fee from the company as fully disclosed in the offering materials. This is the first mention of the relationship between the REIT manager and the REIT. It is signed by the co-president or principal of the REIT, Republic Realm Inc., Jesse Stein, who, as we see up here, is also disclosed to be an agent of the REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC. What you don't see in this document is that Republic Realm Manager is the recipient of those shares. We had to discover that through other offering documents. This is the second, which is dated the same day. I'll prove it to you down here, August 25th. It reports a sale that took place in April. So this was a couple of weeks later. The first sale was in April. We don't know when the last sale was, but the total amount of the Class B shares in dollar value were $9,178,000 raised by, you'll see down here, 51 investors. Those are accredited investors under 506C of Regulation D. Again, there's a clarification just to indicate that these individuals who are named as persons operating the issuer, the REIT, are also agents of the manager, the REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC. It's signed again by Jesse Stein as co-president of the REIT. So these two Form Ds show us the events that took place just after the formation of the REIT. They're reported several months later, August 25th of 2021. The next significant date is September 28th, 2021. On that date, the REIT changed its name from Republic Realm Inc. to Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. On that same date, a new company is formed. It's named, guess what? Republic Realm Inc. So we have a new Republic Realm Inc., not to be confused with the old Republic Realm Inc. The old Republic Realm Inc., which was the REIT, has now changed its name to Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. That is the same name as the REIT has today. So when we talk about the REIT after September 28th, we're talking about Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. The new company, Republic Realm Inc., is formed as an affiliate of Open Deal Inc., doing business as Republic. So it is owned by the parent company, and its purpose is indicated by a concurrent transfer by, you'll recall, Compound Asset Management LLC, of the management rights that they have in the REIT manager to Republic Realm Inc. By this transfer, Republic Realm Inc. becomes the new managing member of the REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC. So let's see what happened again. On September 28th, 2021, the REIT manager gets a new managing member. That new managing member receives all of its rights and interest from the old manager, Compound Asset Management LLC. That new manager is named Republic Realm Inc. It is a brand new company formed on September 28th, 2021. The REIT concurrently changes its name to Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. So on this date, you have a REIT manager, you have a REIT, and you have the managing member of the REIT. We're starting to see the structure form that we talked about in the diagram of the current control structure. And the names are pretty much aligned at this point as far as those entities go. The REIT manager, Republic Realm Manager LLC, has the same name today. It is still operated by Republic Realm Inc., who is the managing member. Republic Realm Inc., of course, is going to change their name again. After the Series A offering a few days ago, they are now EveryRealm Inc. But on September 28th, 2021, they are known as Republic Realm Inc. So when we see Republic Realm Inc. pop up in the Form D reports, we're going to be talking about the managing member of the REIT manager. We'll no longer be referring to the REIT itself. Whereas before, when we saw Republic Realm Inc. pop up in the Form D, it was the REIT itself reporting as the issuer of shares. So that's why in August, it was the REIT that was the issuer of the Class A shares, and the REIT who was the offeror of the Regulation D 506C Class B shares. Now, you'll see that the REIT manager will be doing all of those things, but it's going to be Republic Realm Inc. as its managing member who's going to put their name as the issuer, acting through the REIT manager to raise money on its own behalf and on behalf of the REIT. Try to keep all that in mind. It's very difficult to go through this and look at the different Form Ds at different times and see Republic Realm Inc. And that's why we had to break it up for you in terms of the current control structure and then the timeline, because otherwise it takes quite a bit of parsing to figure out who is doing what on whose behalf, especially considering it's the same three humans, really the same two humans doing all the acting, Mr. Stein and Miss Yorio. So, important date, September 28th is the date that Republic Realm Inc. becomes the managing member of the REIT manager, and the REIT itself changes its name to its current name, Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. Next important date is October 28th, 2021. You'll see that date down here on the right. That is the date that the issuer, Republic Realm Inc., whose principal, Janine Yorio, is CEO, announces a Rule 506B offering, dated first sale October 15th, to 10 accredited investors in the amount of $6,250,020. Now, who is the issuer? Let's think about this for a second. It is Republic Realm Inc. Republic Realm Inc., as we know, is now the organization that is owned by Open Deal as an affiliate, that is the managing member of the REIT manager, and through the REIT manager controls the REIT. So this money is being raised not by the REIT, but by the REIT manager's managing member. For what purpose? All we know is it is for the REIT manager's managing member, and it is being offered to certain accredited investors who require a limited accreditation investigation. And that's all we're going to know about this particular offering. It appears that Republic Realm Inc. is raising money for itself, not for the REIT. It's the only conclusion we can really draw from this. So this was about a month later. This is Republic Realm Inc., the newly formed affiliate of Open Deal, the controller of the REIT manager, raising $6 million from 10 accredited investors for its own. You'll note on the timeline here the October 28th date, the managing member reporting a Reg D 506B offering. And we'll go through the last two dates real quick to finish up the timeline and get back to the documents. December 30, 2021 is when the REIT filed its Regulation A Tier 2, A plus means a Tier 2, offering circular to accept reservations from unaccredited investors on Republic.com. That is the Brownstone investor and the web page we looked at. That is the offering that got our attention at first. That is being offered by the REIT itself to members of the public under Regulation A Tier 2. I also note here that Republic.com itself is operated by an affiliate of Open Deal called Republic Core LLC. That is the entity that does its technical consultation and pretty much does the offerings on the website. So Republic Core LLC is undertaking the Regulation A offering on behalf of the REIT. That offering circular is announced on December 30th. Reservations begin on the website, and the offering circular is filed with the SEC. The next important date is February 10th, a few days ago. That's when we find the managing member of the REIT manager, Republic Realm Inc., reported a Regulation D 506B offering of $55 million to a number of accredited investors. On that same day, we have news reports of a $60 million Series A funding round led by Andreessen Horowitz, and we see that the name of the managing member, Republic Realm Inc., is changed again to EveryRealm Inc. EveryRealm Inc. is now a spun-off company independently owned by the Series A investors and Republic Open Deal Inc. as a minority owner. Here's the Form D for the final offering on that February 10th. You'll notice, importantly, the previous names box is filled in, and it says EveryRealm Inc. This seems a little odd to me. The name of the issuer is still Republic Realm Inc., and the previous name is listed as EveryRealm Inc. It would seem to be the other way around. I don't know if you can make heads or tails of this, but as far as I understand it, this is the document reporting the $60 million Series A round. $55 million is the amount put here, not 60. $41 million was sold already when this was reported on the 10th of February. The first sale was February 4th. There are no other documents filed by an EveryRealm Inc. Republic Realm Inc. is the issuer here, signed by Janine Yorio as Chief Executive Officer on February 10th, and that is all the information we have on this Series A besides what was reported in the news. So from here on out, we're going to be talking about the Regulation A offering because that is all the documentation we have on the private placements under Regulation D. The Regulation A circular, which was announced December 30th, it is filed under this Form 1A with some pretty good information in here. It gives the name of the issuer as REalm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. That's the REIT. The contact information, Jesse Stein. Here, let's look at the, what does this thing hold? It reports $0 of, well, everything. It reports 2 classes of stock, Class A and Class B, and the outstanding shares. It reports certain questions that need to be answered pursuant to Regulation A. It reports that it's offering 750,000 securities at a value of $75 million. You'll see up here, that is the reservation amount that they were seeking from the public, $75 million. So that amount being offered was fully reserved, and it's been fully reserved since before the announcement of EveryRealm. The Form 1A goes on giving more information about where these are going to be issued, and we can go through this. I'll scroll through it if you want. You can also go look at it yourself in the EDGAR database the SEC provides. That's where we got this. This is one interesting note here. It talks about the unregistered securities that the REIT already has outstanding. It talks about the Class A stock, which was issued under 506B. That was that August report where they transferred the shares from the REIT to the REIT manager. It also talks about Section 4A2. That's the general section that allows for the exemptions. And then it talks about the Rule 506C issuance of the Class B common stock that also took place on that August date. So the rest of those Regulation D offerings were the REIT manager's managing member. So we only have one sale of Class B stock, and that sale raised the funds that were used to do the initial digital asset investments that the REIT undertook. You'll see in a second that they went and bought some of the real estate in Decentraland and all those other areas, and now that they hold those, they're going back to the unaccredited investors to raise more money to develop those parcels of real estate. And we'll get into that in a second, but I do want to show you what this offering circular it looks like. This is the REalm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. offering statement pursuant to Regulation A that is pending approval by the SEC. Now, I wonder how many of these unaccredited investors who have already reserved their share spot read through this entire circular. I have. There's a lot of great information in here about the company and about its history, about the risks involved, but it is very, very detailed and lengthy. So as far as limited disclosures are concerned, this is what a limited disclosure looks like. You can imagine what it would be like trying to do a regular offering under the Securities Act of 1933, but a lot of good information in here. If you're really interested in this and about all the particular details of the REIT, I recommend that you go find this, and I'll show you where to find it and look through it. But we are not going to read through it right now because I think that would be a little bit too much like a tooth pulling for you. So just want to show you what this document is. This document needs to be approved by the SEC before the offering under Regulation A can take place. So now let's return to our Jeff's first day one deal from the day one investor, telling everyone about the magnificent opportunity that they have to invest in Metaverse real estate on day one by investing in a manager who has all the expertise necessary to make this dream a reality. It starts out with a story of Julia Tuttle. Julia Tuttle paid just $6,000 for a plot of land in what would become Miami. She was able to attract an industrialist to lay a railroad to go down to Miami, and eventually Miami would grow from a town of 861 residents in 1890 to one of hundreds of thousands in 1930, and today nearly 6.2 million people, representing a change in value from $570 per acre in 1891 to $14.42 million today, a 2.5 million% gain. What is the implication? You too could see a 2.5 million% gain, just like Julia Tuttle. Julia Tuttle, if you go and look at the story though, unfortunately, I believe she gave away a lot of her land and ended up in a lot of debt when she died. Her ended up having to sell off the land just to pay the debt. So I don't think that Julia Tuttle actually saw any return, but he tends to gloss over that because he wants you to be just like the fictional Julia Tuttle he has created, who saw the opportunity just like you're going to see the opportunity, and you're going to realize incredible returns if you follow his advice. What does he do next? He goes on to describe to people who would not understand what a metaverse is, that a metaverse is just like a regular place, but a digital realm. And it talks about things like DJ Marshmallow hosting a concert in the metaverse. The metaverse in this case being the Fortnite video game. Ariana Grande, big names that people recognize. All of these concepts are injected to make people feel comfortable enough with the idea of the metaverse as a potential investment opportunity without having to understand what exactly it is. It does do a pretty good job of breaking it down for the individual, but it's doing it in a promotion type way that could be misleading in certain respects, and we want to go ahead and, in analyzing this document, show where some of those misleading statements could be a problem for an investor who lacks sophistication. So we go through here. It talks about Decentraland. It talks about a DAO. It talks about virtual reality, Somnium Space. Talks about Facebook becoming Meta, because that was a big deal in terms of the public's view of the metaverse. Most people hadn't heard of the metaverse until Facebook changed its name to Meta. Of course, Facebook has nothing to do with this metaverse, where EveryRealm is investing. EveryRealm is investing in the decentralized metaverse. Facebook wants to create its own metaverse, but that's neither here nor there. Going down further, it talks about Realm as a company similar to a real estate investment trust. It talks about Jesse Stein and Janine Yorio, how they came from a company called Compound Asset Management, where they acquired diversified residential real estate. Doesn't really get into the relationship between Compound and the REIT manager that we discussed in our previous slides. It talks about what a development would look like on a piece of digital real estate, and this is the Metajuku shopping district. Since this document came out, there have been a few more developments, but at the time, this was the one that they had built as the model or example of what is possible in the metaverse. And then we get to the opportunity, and I want to show you this table. This is the Republic Realm holdings, and this is an important table. And this gets back to the idea of net asset value. So when they had that first round of Regulation D funding back in, that was reported in August, but it was raised in April of 2021. They took those funds and they purchased these digital assets. They say number of parcels, 294 in Decentraland, 1,300 in the Sandbox, etc. And they have the cost basis. This is what they paid for these NFTs, essentially, in these different metaverses. These other metaverse assets are going to be the relevant currencies in the metaverses. Then we see the current value. You'll note that in most cases, the current value has increased. Now, how do they determine the current value? Well, that current value is the net asset value determined by the manager of the REIT. You'll recall that that is determined by Ms. Yorio and Mr. Stein. They claim to be using a combination of a comp analysis, where they compare the rise in value of parcels nearby in the different metaverses, and a venture capital model where they look at the potential of future use of the land that they're holding. So they're actually counting the value of the future development that they're going to be building, which is interesting because they haven't built it yet, and they're going to be raising the money under Regulation A based on the net asset value of the holdings as of the date of the approval of the circular. So they're raising money from the unaccredited investors to develop the digital real estate based upon a value which partially includes an estimation of the added value of that investment. So there's a couple of problems here. What this document is telling you is you have a chance as an unaccredited investor in this Regulation A offering to be a ground floor investor, but you're not really getting in on the ground floor. You're getting in after the digital assets have already been purchased and revalued. That revaluation is not an objective amount. I mean, they've given themselves in the Sandbox a 319% return on their holdings. They've done nothing to them. You're getting in as the Regulation A offeree at this current value. And I wonder if that's really understood when you're reading through this. It's a complicated topic, but it's simple to understand. I'm getting in on the ground floor. So that's what that table provides us, is what Realm Republic has given themselves is a 145% return on assets that they purchased held by the REIT based on nothing other than a net asset value determination that they themselves make. They gave themselves a 145% return, and you're investing in the REIT, and your shares that you're purchasing, the value is based upon that inflated net asset value. I think that's important to understand. So they go through this. He does talk about the net asset value. But again, it's complicated, and it's not something that's going to stick in your head as easy as I'm getting in on the ground floor. He talks about, you know, the way he evaluates this is a good idea, and essentially says yes, yes, and yes. And asks the very important question, is this a reasonable valuation? Well, he's looking for 100x returns. Hey, it's not at all a stretch to imagine that the net asset value of this portfolio grows to a multi-billion-dollar value. Well, that's a pretty scientific approach. I'm pretty excited. How do I invest? And that's where it gets into, well, then you go to republic.co, do your reservation. There's a testing the waters campaign, something that I haven't mentioned yet, but when you're testing the waters, that means that you don't even have to do the offering. You can have the reservations and then say, never mind, we're not doing it. So that could happen. You can't take any money until you actually announce it, but as of right now, it's a testing the waters, and there's only reservations. Those reservations have been filled up to the full $75 million offering. So he's telling everyone, this is the time to do it. Let's do it. Click right here, minimum investment $1,000. Oh, by the way, disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. We don't actually invest in this. We just publish this document. Who are these people? We'll never really figure it out. But that is how the public, members of the public, are generally introduced to something like an offering in a REIT, is through publications such as this one, which, while not intentionally misleading, are going to be simplifications, and they're going to be promotional in a way that may or may not be interpreted as an opportunity that really hides the potential risk of loss. Here's that landing page where we talked about. This is where it brings you. If you wanted to join the waitlist, you can still do that now. It gives you much of the same information we already talked about. Oh, we got a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. How about that? What is Metaverse? Et cetera, et cetera. What's our strategy? Here's a pie chart of our holdings and stuff that we've already talked about, but I just wanted to show you. This is the pitch, as you can see from the top. The market opportunity. Hey, billions of dollars, right? This is another way of looking at the valuation. Talks about as of November 2nd, the return on invested capital is 145%. So that gives you a net asset value per share of $205.57 after the fees. What fees are those? Those are the management fees. Remember, the base fee and the incentive fee. So the manager goes in, reevaluates all the holdings to give themselves a pretty nice return, and then takes out their incentive fees based on that, and gives you a net asset value per share of 205. So if you were to get in and buy shares on that date, this would be the price of the share. Of course, it's going to be valued even later, so there's going to be another revaluation, and one may presume that it would go up even more. Then we look at the team, what the offering actually is, what the testing the waters disclaimer is. Where is that circular? Didn't see it. Did anyone else see it? Nope. Actually, you have to go up here to updates, where they talk about the new SEC filing, and you get it here. So that's where the circular is. That's where all of the disclosed information, unspun, can be found, and that's the document we looked at that has got a lot of good information, but it's pretty dry, and we doubt that many of these unaccredited investors even looked at it. We hope they did look at it, but we doubt that they did. We suspect that they looked at something like that Brownstone publication. But, you know, we are happy that people are getting excited about the metaverse and that they're investing. They don't have the wherewithal to invest directly in something like an NFT, so they go through someone like a Realm Metaverse. But there is also some confusion as to what this EveryRealm announcement meant. So we go down here, we see that there's some discussion here. Let's see. Angel asked, does EveryRealm 60 million Series A announcement is the reason why my reservation has not been collected yet? So that's a loaded question. And you see Jesse Stein comes in here and tries to respond. So you'll see, first you have a guy named Juan who got a reservation, we presume, but now we're investing in EveryRealm, so there's the confusion there. Jesse responds, no, it's in Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc. Angel says, I'm confused, so EveryRealm and Republic Realm are two different companies? And of course it's confusing. Look at how much explanation we had to go through to explain it to you. EveryRealm is the managing member of the REIT manager. The REIT manager is an LLC who's different from both EveryRealm and Republic Realm. Jesse's response is simply that the offering is still waiting to be qualified by the SEC. The EveryRealm announcement does not impact the process. The offering is for Realm Metaverse Real Estate Inc., which is a company that EveryRealm, formerly known as Republic Realm, manages. He explains that it's similar to when you invest in a Fidelity ETF. You're investing in the ETF managed by Fidelity and not in Fidelity, the company. Well, the difference here is, of course, that the ETF investment was offered to the public before it was made known that the manager, a different company, would be offering a $60 million offering to accredited investors and celebrities like Paris Hilton. So there is some reason for confusion, and we think it would have been maybe better explained up front that this is a REIT only and that Republic Realm Inc. is a parent company. But that's what these discussion boards are for, I suppose, and hopefully the investors in this Regulation A offering will eventually get their Class B shares. And we enjoyed explaining to you all of the different formulations and uses of the securities laws that went into designing the control and operation of this metaverse real estate entity. Obviously, it's very complicated. It's obviously the work of some very astute securities lawyers like Mr. Nguyen, and some experts in real estate investment like Mr. Stein and Ms. Yorio, who've also done a great job at PR and getting people excited about the metaverse. But we've also showed you that there are some pitfalls with offering shares of companies to unaccredited investors. We hope that those pitfalls aren't realized here and that everybody is a happy and rich investor in the metaverse, and we'll be following how EveryRealm develops and whether or not this real estate investment trust analog is successful. So again, we enjoy bringing you this content. If you liked this content, please indicate that you liked it. Please subscribe to our channel. You'll get the regular updates of regulatory developments. You'll also get these more in-depth videos discussing the securities laws and the different rules as applied to different aspects of the cryptocurrency realm. We enjoy bringing these to you, and we'll be talking to you soon.